that thing where right when the music starts playing, you feel like you're going to sneeze? I'm suppressing it right now. I'm suppressing a sneeze. Happy Monday. I am Cy Killett, your host. This is Catholic Answers Live. And this hour, we got Trent Horn with us to talk about being hated. I don't know why we put those two together, like talking about being hated and you being here, but when the world hates you is our topic this hour. 888-318-7884 is the number. And as I said, Trent Horn is our guest. Trent is an apologist extraordinaire, a speaker, and a prolific and also very helpful writer. I guess it's possible to be prolific, and that's not really much of a value. But your combination, prolific and helpful. Hello, Trent.
Hello, Cy.
See how much I had to talk to keep that sneeze from coming up?
Did you manage to suppress your sneeze?
I believe it is fully suppressed now.
Repressed.
Yes. I tamped it down.
Okay.
So can I tell you a little bit about my day before we start?
You're the host. Go right ahead.
So my daughter had wisdom teeth out, and it didn't go very well. Mm-hmm. So I had to go home and sit with her because she had to take some medicine, and they wanted someone to sit with her. And so I'm sitting with her, and she's in a little bit of a medicated state and chooses to watch a TV show called A Handmaid's Tale or The Handmaid's Tale, one of those two things.
Based on the novel by Margaret Atwood.
Yes, right. Not based on a novel by a man named Lear. But,
right.
Okay, so I have to tell you, as a Christian person, I felt a little bit hated. I felt like maybe the people who make this show don't really like Christians that much.
No, you just sound like one of the patriarchs who runs the Republic of Gilead.
Yeah, the Republic of Gilead. I mean, it was like a little bit of oppression theater is what it was.
Yeah,
it was
I know. I haven't.
Theater of the oppressed.
Yeah, I have not watched the film. I'm familiar with the novel A Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and it is a piece of dystopian science fiction literature that takes place in a future where after a nuclear war or a military coup, a bunch of patriarchal, I'm not sure, are they Christian or not?
Yeah, they're Christian. Yeah, they turned my favorite part of this whole show that we were watching was they turned the what is it? The Washington Monument into a cross. They put like a cross beam across.
Right. Yeah.
So they're triumphalist Christians, I suppose.
Yeah, like triumphalist patriarchal Christians,
right,
who then proceed to live out all of their worst misogynistic fantasies, and that they not only make abortion illegal, but then because of the nuclear war, women are infertile, and so some women who are handmaidens have to engage in relations with them in a strange simulated sex act. It's just absolutely terrible. But there are people who say that we're 3 steps away from the Republic of Gilead.
Oh, I think there's people that think it's way less than 3 steps.
Yeah, that we're almost there with the way. And so what I thought would be good today is to discuss the idea of Christian persecution in the United States and what that means. Can we really say Christians suffer from persecution, especially in the Western world, the United States, when there are other places around the world where Christian churches are routinely bombed, Christians are decapitated for proselytizing their faith, or stoned to death. But just because people suffer for the faith more in other places, it doesn't follow that Christians don't suffer for sharing and living out their faith here in the United States at a lesser rate. That would be like saying, if you said, well, we should do something about poverty in America, and I said, Cy, stop whining about poverty in America. Did you know there are places around the world where people starve to death and have cholera? And there are places around the world where there is extreme poverty you do not find in the United States. But that, of course, would not nullify that you ought to do something about poverty in the United States, even though it's less severe. Much the same way if Christians are being maltreated. So a term that I use, it comes from a 7th, 8th century Irish homily, is white martyrdom. So a red martyr would be someone who spills blood for the faith, that renounce your Christian faith or you'll be executed, you'll be killed. Things that we saw in feudal Japan, ancient Rome, the Soviet Union. We don't have that here in the United States. But we do have other things where in trying to live out your Christian virtues, your Christian principles, you can be kept from, you could be made a social pariah. You could be kept from holding certain kinds of employment. Your business can be threatened to be shut down. We look at Masterpiece Cake Shop in Colorado, for example, which is now the victim of a 3rd lawsuit attempting to shut it down. Yeah. These are people who are seeking to end, I think it's Jack Phillips, the name of the guy who runs Masterpiece Cake Shop, people who are seeking to end his career as a baker because he does not want to make cakes for same-sex weddings or transgender reveal parties.
Or Halloween.
Yeah, he doesn't. Oh, he doesn't make Halloween cakes,
right?
Because he has those are his Christian principles he wants to live by. So the question is, what do we do when we try to live out our faith according to Christian principles? How do we do that when people then counter and hate us, malign us, want to persecute us, deprive us of social standing, of the ability to school our children properly? And what should we do in that regard? So how do we share the faith in a hostile world? I deal with this all the time on Catholic Answers Live, on my own podcast, Council of Trent podcast. I recently had an interview with an atheist that was extremely heated, actually. He was none too pleased, but my listeners thought I handled it with a lot of grace. And that's what we need to have when we engage people who hate us. So I can't wait to get to calls here in a sec, but the scripture verse that reminds me of this is Jesus's warning to the apostles, more of words of encouragement, really. In John 15, verses 18 through 21, Jesus says, "If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But all this they will do to you on my account because they do not know him who sent me." So Jesus knew this would happen. We have to be faithful to him in the face of it.
888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. When the world hates you, that is our topic this hour with Trent Horn. 888-318-7884. Trent, I feel like a lot of this has come to the head, and I feel like I go back to this a lot, and I hope I'm not a broken record, but it does seem that the sexual revolution is the primary point where people decided Christianity was a problem. I mean, I don't think before that in our culture Christianity was treated as problematic. But once the sexual revolution happened, because Christianity is a religion that is very deeply connected to the virtue of chastity and really the virtues of chaste living and of healthy family and all that.
Right.
So it does seem to me a lot of the if people feel hatred at work or when they listen to something on the cable news or something towards Christian faith, it's almost always related to the sexual revolution.
Right, and I think that we have to go back to 1968. That really the touchstone for this would be Pope Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae, because that was where people were debating, is the church going to quote unquote get with the times?
Yeah.
And it clearly did not for critics. So people then saw that as a problem. I've always found that to be humorous, that I engage people all the time who I disagree with morally and theologically. So it's only in the issues, though, of sexual morality that I'm really accused of hate. So if I say that socialism is theft, I actually don't know very many socialists who would say that I hate them personally, that I hate socialists. I think they're hopelessly mistaken. I think they're idealists who, as Pope Leo XIII said, do not see the world as it really is. And that's why I'm writing a book with economist Catherine Pacolic called Why Catholics Can't Be Socialists, that will be slated to come out next spring. But when I say Protestants are in error about the Eucharist, that Protestants get the Eucharist wrong, for example, or that atheists are completely incorrect about reality when it comes to the existence of God, I'm not accused of hate. But when I say something like sexual behavior between two men and two women is disordered, immediately someone says I'm hateful. That's hatred. Or if I were to say, if I just quoted 1 Corinthians 6:9-10, where St. Paul provides a litany of sins that will keep people from inheriting the kingdom of God. Greed, drunkenness. If I say drunks won't get into heaven, people might be like, well, all right, they might raise an eyebrow to that.
Yeah.
But if I say people who engage in unrepentant homosexual behavior will not enter into heaven, suddenly I'm hateful. And what's funny is even Peter Singer, the atheistic philosopher, a hat tip here to Ed Fazer for pointing this out on his blog. There was a Australian rugby player who quoted 1 Corinthians 6:9-10. And people said, I think he suffered sanctions because of this. And Peter Singer, who is an Australian philosopher, said that saying that people who engage in homosexual behavior will go to hell, or homosexuals will go to hell, is no more hateful than saying that smokers will get lung cancer. Now, of course, Singer's an atheist. He doesn't believe in any of this stuff.
Right. He believes in lung cancer.
Right, but But Singer says people who think this is hateful just don't take the Christian beliefs seriously. They don't understand the gravity of what people believe when they articulate them. So that if I've made this point before on the broadcast, that if I really hated someone, if I believed it as a fact that if someone engages in this sin, they will be damned, and if I really hated them, I just wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
It'd be like if you imagine your mortal enemy, the guy who stole your wife, got you kicked out of your house, the guy you absolutely hate, and you see him riding his Segway. I don't imagine it. Just to make him even more villainous, he's on a Segway.
That gives it a creepy air there. I don't know. This guy is so bad, but he's riding a Segway.
And he's going to go over a cliff, which is sad. I think actually the inventor of the Segway, the reason I thought it was because he actually, unfortunately, passed away driving over a cliff.
No, he did not.
I think he did.
Dean Kamen?
Look it up. Someone look it up and call in.
Look that up.
But my point is, if you despise this individual and they're going to ride over the cliff, if you really, really hated them, it would be understandable for you to not say anything. I'm not saying that's right, because Jesus says love your enemies. But I'm saying if you hated them, you would do that. Not the instinct of, if you hate them, go and warn them about a danger they're going to face. What's hard is people think that it's not just the sexual revolution side, it's also the fact that people have lost sight of hell. That now the only thing Christianity really saves us from is just,
not being nice.
Not being nice, a lack of well-being. When you bring up eternal damnation, it's like you thought up this thing.
Yeah,
and now you're in trouble.
I believe Jesus mentioned that.
Quite a few times.
Yeah. All right. Well, when you are hated, or when the world hates you, is our topic this hour. Trent Horn is our guest. We do have calls, and I do want to get to those calls, but we have to take a break. We'll take that break. We'll get to those calls right after this.
Catholic Answers Live. The only thing missing from today's broadcast is you. Call now with your question.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features daily Mass, prayers, articles, and meditations in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at magnificat.com.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
I would describe myself as a revert, and ever since I came back to a practice of my faith, I started praying the rosary, going to even daily Mass, God has led me on an amazing journey and used me in a lot of incredible ways that I never dreamed would have been possible, and I'm just so grateful to God for all of His gifts and blessings in my life.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, tomorrow, noon Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn, our guest this hour, and it was the guy who bought the Segway company from Dean Kamen that died in an accident. I'm sorry, it's very unfortunate.
No, yes, but
I didn't believe you when you said it. I'm sorry that just seemed
ironic.
Yeah, I guess it had a certain element of irony to it.
Indeed.
A very unpleasant irony. Guess who's here with us in studio? Did you look to your left there? Oh, it's right. Sorry, that's your right there. That's my left.
Good one, Si.
Hi, Erica.
Hi.
So the conference is sold out. Is that what you came to tell us, or can you still come?
It's nearly sold out.
Really?
No.
Oh. See, now I was going to believe you because I didn't believe the last thing.
No, but we're getting close. You guys should all come. That's all I got to say. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited, and I'm starting to get like those nerves and excitement because it's like 2.5 months away, less than 2.5 months away at this point.
It's going to be awesome.
I'm so excited.
CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Yes.
Is where you go. CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Wait, but you forgot to tell them the best part.
I didn't know that I was allowed to say that.
You could say it.
I think
say it.
This shocked me, and I think I might have teared up a
Can
little
I
bit.
tell? Can
when
I
you
tell
told
them
me.
the story?
Yeah, could you please tell me this?
Okay, so I run into Cy in the hallway, and I had something to tell him, and I had gone to his office before, and he wasn't there, and so I was looking for him, and I find him in the hallway having a conversation with 2 other employees here at Catholic Answers, and I point at him, and he goes, "What?" And I said, "I'm turning you into a cookie."
Yeah.
And he started, like, you could see the tears forming in his eyes.
This was
And
very
he goes,
emotional for me.
What did you say? You said,
This is
"I
the
think
happiest
this
day
is
of my
the happiest day of my life."
Happier than the day I got married. And I still am somewhat stunned by the fact that you're turning me into a cookie.
I'm so excited about these cookies.
Do you remember the Jimmy Akin M&Ms last year?
Vaguely.
Now there's going to be cookies.
Do you remember?
And guess whose image is going to be on the cookies?
Okay, first we had the Catholic Answers cookie. It was in the shape. It was a frosted
that
cookie.
That thing was so good.
And the frosting was in the shape of the Catholic Answers shield.
Right.
Then the next year, we put Jimmy Akin's face on an M&M, which was really neat.
I still ate them.
And this year, I found a company that actually creates a cookie cutter stamp in the shape of whoever you want.
So what
So we're
what
making
flavor are the Cy cookies?
They're sugar cookies.
Which is
They're
very
sugar
much like
cookies,
the actual
but it'll
meat,
literally
made
look
out of sugar primarily.
like Cy Kellett. And
Yeah.
everyone who comes to the conference gets a Cy Kellett shaped sugar cookie.
Do you know that the heads on these
Like, you
cookies
can
are bigger than
eat
the body?
Cy
Like they're
Kellett's
like a
face.
bobblehead size head and a tiny little body.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like me. I have a big, giant, round Irish head, and so I already feel
The
so
problem is
touched by
now
this.
if you have a cookie that looks like you, it's going to make your head even bigger. Like look at me, I'm on a cookie. You know,
That's
not
actually
good for your
true.
head. It's gonna make
That's
your head-
actually true. That's not wrong. I feel like I'm walking a little taller now. That
I'm
I know
just so
gonna be
excited
cool.
about these cookies.
Yeah, Cy Kellett cookie. I'm super
Yeah.
excited.
So if you come to the conference, you get,
get one?
a Cy Kellett cookie, and you can eat Cy's head, if you want.
no, you just made that weird.
Or maybe you can autograph the cookies. I don't know.
with a frosting pencil. I'll
There
get a
you go.
frosting pencil. Yeah. So go to CatholicAnswersConference.com. It's going to be so much
It's gonna
fun.
be
We have
so
a ball.
fun.
The speakers are unbelievable. I can go through them again if you want. Look,
Yeah, go through
from
'em.
outside of this building, Monsignor Eugene Morris. That's enough right there. Okay. Father David McConey. That's enough right there.
Mm-hmm.
No, but we go on. But there's more. Rod Bennett. Bishop Frank Caggiano, Father Paul Check, and then our guys from here in the building, Tim Staples, Jimmy Akin, Carlo Broussard, all going to be there. And we're going to
You're going to be there.
I'm going to be
Father
there doing
Hugh's
the radio.
going to be there.
radio
Father Hugh's
show.
going to be doing some of the masses.
What's the matter, Trent?
I am just trying to restrain my excitement.
And
Have we reminded people what
we've
it's...
never talked
I didn't
about,
say Trent's name.
We've
so
never
he got it.
talked about the conference. At least I haven't been on the air with you when Trent is on the air with you.
Oh, really?
I've never talked to Trent about
Oh, you
what
should
his,
ask it.
talk, what
His
his
talk's
talk's
going to be
gonna
good.
That's right.
I'm all joking aside, I'm truly, really looking forward to Trent's talk.
Trent, tell us about your talk.
Oh, well, the talk is going to be about what was not in the early church, and Cy Kellett cookies are one of those.
That is not the truth.
No.
That's not what you're talking about.
No, so the theme of the conference is the early church was the Catholic Church. And so many of the speakers will be talking about the historical roots of the Catholic faith, that the first Christians practiced the universal faith, the Catholic faith. I'm going to be doing a talk on how Protestants distort this evidence, because many people become Catholic when they read the early church fathers. And I believe it was Newman who said, to be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant. Well, there's many Protestants who try to read the church fathers and interpret them in their own light. And so I'm going to show how some of those quotes, when taken out of context, can seem convincing to someone who doesn't know the full background. So that's going to be a lot of fun to dive into.
It's going to be great. We have some great non-talk events. We have the show.
Yeah, twice. We're going to do the show twice.
Thursday and Friday with audience questions.
Right.
And then we have
Square Dancing with Jimmy Akin.
Square Dancing with Jimmy Akin. We have a big banquet dinner. If you purchase the full conference ticket, it includes a big banquet dinner with Bishop Frank Caggiano as the keynote address at the dinner. And we have a poolside reception. We have hors d'oeuvres and a bar where everybody just gets to mingle and meet each other. You're going to get to come to a conference and get to know 900 of your...
1,000.
1,000 of your...
It's going to be 1,000.
It's going to be 1,000? You think we're going to sell it out this time?
CatholicAnswersConference.com. Catholic Answers
CatholicAnswersConference.com.
There you go. Very good. Michael on Facebook says that if it's going to be a Cy Kellett cookie, it's going to have to be half baked. Does that seems mean to me?
Boom, that was a good one.
That seems
That
mean.
was a good one. I like it.
888-318-7884 is the number. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
We better get to some calls here before too long. Up first is Marie in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Marie, your question for Trent Horn.
Hi. Yeah. I have a question that is regarding specifically the hatred towards Catholics in regards to the priest abuse crisis that's going on. I'm a practicing Catholic myself, and so I find that it's hard to respond to that kind of hate and come up with a good response because, I find myself being angry about it too, and so it's kind of hard to really, it's something that we can't reconcile, and so I guess I'm just looking for tips on how to handle that.
Yeah. So Marie, when you say hatred that you receive, do you feel like they're getting mad at you, or they're just kind of venting in your presence?
I think that it's not mad at me specifically, but it's more of a general hatred toward the Catholic Church, and then a question to me is like, how can you support this? How can you practice in the church that does this? And it's hard for me to respond.
Sure. I think what I always try to do, Marie, when I'm in these situations is ask questions to lead people to the point that I want to make. So, I find asking questions to be helpful to diffuse hostility and help people to understand where I'm coming from instead of just giving a speech or a paragraph answer. The point I want people to get to is, if this is the church Jesus founded, I can't leave Jesus's church any more than I could leave Jesus. That would be that this is not just something that a bunch of guys in Rome came up with a few centuries ago. It's the church Jesus founded. If I can't leave, you don't leave Jesus because of Judas, as I think my colleague Tim Staples says that frequently, or you don't leave Peter because of Judas. So I think one question you might ask them is, why do you think I go to Mass? Why do you think I still go to Mass in spite of this abuse? Now, are these people who are mad at you, are they Catholic or non-Catholic?
I've experienced it from both.
Sure.
Not any practicing Catholics, but yeah.
Sure. So I might ask that you could always ask them, why do you think I go to Mass? And I mean, you could see what kind of answers they would give to you. And there you can point out, to see if they get the answer right or wrong, that at the primary level, I go because it is only at the Catholic Mass that I can receive the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, that I can receive him. And in John chapter 6, Jesus makes it clear, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life within you. Jesus gave us the Eucharist for our salvation. How can I turn my back on him just because some members of his church have failed? And so that might be one way that you could say to them, how could I do that? As if you're putting the question to them to help them to see it from your perspective. Once on the air, Marie, I remember a while back, I gave an analogy to a young man who was very mad about the church and he hadn't been to Mass in a while. And I use this analogy modified a bit. It's from St. Peter Canisius, who was a saint during the time of the Reformation, when, man, the church was there was a lot of bad stuff going on. Something like 90% of the priests couldn't read. They had concubines. It's terrible. So there was a lot of corruption there. But St. Peter Canisius, borrowing from him, I gave this analogy. And I'll ask you this, Marie. Suppose you're walking down the road and you saw a diamond, like a 1 carat solid 1 carat diamond on the side of the road, but it was in dog poo. What would you do? I know
that's a good question.
you know, a 1 carat diamond's probably worth like 10 grand.
Yes.
Would you just keep walking, or?
I know what I would do.
I suppose
That diamond's going home with me.
I would try to.
You'd probably try to clean it off, hold your nose, clean it off, right?
Right, exactly.
So what I said to the guy was, if you're willing to put up with poo for something that's worth a few $1,000s, shouldn't we be willing to put up with bad stuff to receive something that's worth infinitely more. Second, so I think it's important to get the moral principle down, but then it's also, you should ask them, well, how many priests do you think have broken their vows in this way? Surely it's a very, very small minority. And what do you want the church to do? What should the Catholic Church do in response? And you can point to things like the Dallas Charter in 2002, or the safe environment training that parishes have done. Even in Omaha, your own diocese has published lists of accused offenders to be above board. So I think you can ask them, what should the church do? And you can point to the fact the church is doing those things. Give it a chance to right these wrongs.
Marie, thanks very, very much for the call. Darren and I are going to work with Trent on his analogies during the break, and we'll come back with some that are less disgusting right after
Won't
this.
be as on point, though.
Looking for an on-fire Catholic speaker for your event? Catholic Answers speakers will inform and inspire your audience to grow in their Catholic faith. For more information on booking a Catholic Answers speaker, visit CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com today.
In his new audio presentation, The Very First Fathers, apologist Jimmy Akin takes you on a tour of the earliest Christian writings outside the New Testament. From the most famous figures and most notable works to those lesser known but no less important, this pivotal time in the development of the early church is revealed in fascinating detail. Jimmy shows how, even in the first century after the resurrection, it was necessary to defend and explain truths that are still under attack today, such as the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the perpetual virginity of Mary. The Very First Fathers is a compelling look at the dawn of the Christian age and edifying listening for anyone who wants to understand and defend the full truth of Catholicism. Order your copy of The Very First Fathers today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Love and beauty. As a little girl, Dawn Eden Goldstein knew that she wanted those things, that in them somehow she would find God. Over the years as a rock journalist, she moved among some of popular music's best-known artists, straining to capture that transcendent love and beauty in every note and lyric. In Sunday Will Never Be the Same, Dawn recounts her spiritual journey in beautifully wrought detail, mixing powerful accounts of trauma, healing, and epiphany with funny anecdotes from inside the music scene. It is the rare conversion story that delights as it inspires, amuses as it edifies, and ultimately lays before the reader a lived testimony to the transforming grace of Christ. Order your copy of Sunday Will Never Be the Same by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This is Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. The Morning Glory team asked the question, changing the rules? Priestly ordination in the Amazon. Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
When the world hates you, that's our topic this hour. Christians around the world are hated and reviled in various places and suffer terrible persecution in some countries. We hear about, especially in the last decade, how China has reverted to pretty open persecution of Christians in some of the provinces, and many of the provinces of China, actually. What happens to Christians in places like North Korea and in Pakistan is really unspeakable. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find Christians returning that favor in anywhere, although I'm sure that there are places where Christians are ill-behaved. Around the world, Christians face persecution. Maybe in the United States, if we were going to be careful with our language and our claims, we would say there's an element of harassment. There's an element of a growing desire, I think, to persecute Christians, but certainly a sense of greater and greater discomfort with being public in one's Christianity in the United States. And so we talk this hour about what to do when the world hates you with Trent Horn, our apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of many books, including Why We're Catholic and his most recent Counterfeit Christ. He's also the podcaster behind the Council of Trent, and you can find that at TrentHornPodcast.com. Trent, you ready to just go back to calls? We got a bunch.
Let's do it.
All right, let's go to Joe in Chicago. He's listening on the Catholic Answers app. Joe, your question for Trent Horn.
Hi, Trent. I just recently listened to your podcast with the atheist guy, with that old guy. My question basically is, like, how did you be able to, like, keep your cool and everything and not get so angry? Because I'm a philosophy student. I'm a philosophy and theology student.
Oh, great.
And, like, his arguments were garbage. Like, they were just not very good. They're not very intelligent. It seems like he got it from atheist website, whatever atheist website he looked from.
Sure.
And I was so surprised that, like, you could just sit there and just take that from him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I try to do on my podcast at TrentHornPodcast.com is to, one, offer my own reflections on current events, on philosophy, apologetics, Catholic theology, to equip people to share their faith. And one way I've tried to do that recently, to model that for people, is to have people on the show who disagree with me on a variety of aspects of the Catholic faith. I've got 2 more conversations scheduled soon, one on abortion with an atheist blogger, and the next on Sola Scriptura with a Protestant who's been a longtime follower of my work. And the one thing I like doing on the podcast is we have these conversations like Catholic Answers Live sometimes, but due to the constraints of live radio, I can't stay with people very long, and these conversations take a while to tease out. And yeah, Tom, there was my conversation with Tom Rafferty, and people can go online to listen to it. He was certainly, I think aggressive would be a fine term to describe his tone with me, and it was definitely combative. But I think what we have to understand in these conversations to maintain a peaceful demeanor is to know where you want to go in the conversation and ask for help from God to get there. So we need to always be people of prayer, to pray before these difficult conversations, to pray during them, and even after them, that God's truth will fall on people's hearts, and hardened hearts will be unhardened to receive it. But one thing I did, if you listen to the conversation with Tom Rafferty, was I tried to ask him questions to get at the roots of his beliefs and show there are some logical contradictions in there. And sometimes he responded somewhat forcefully back to me. But you always have to remember, you don't want to respond in kind. Never, ever, ever get angry back at the person. You might have this deep feeling inside, oh, I really want to show him. I really want to show this person. And you know what? It's okay to give in to that feeling. St. Paul kind of talks about this in the letter to the Romans. He says that when you are kind to an enemy, it is like heaping hot coals on their head. It drives them crazy when you are kind in response. So you can kind of almost get at someone, not maliciously, but help them to see they're the ones who've worked themselves up and they have an incoherent view by being kind in response. So when I'm in these conversations on Catholic Answers Live or on my podcast, and someone is aggressive with me, how to keep my cool, I want to know where I'm going. So before I get into a conversation, I know if it's about abortion, I want to get to the question, what are the unborn? If it's about atheism, I want to get to the question, what is your evidence against God and what's wrong with the arguments for God? I want you to defend those claims. Hopefully in a future book, I'll write all this down, I think. So I always try to get to when I know where I'm going in a conversation, I'm less tense. I think people are more apt to get defensive and angry when they feel lost in the conversation. So knowing where you want to go, and part of that comes from just learning the faith and learning the arguments. When you know where you want to go, you're a lot more at ease. Then you ask questions, you make them defend their view. And then you understand that even just by being quiet, if they're trying to steamroll you, as the Christian apologist Greg Koukl says, let them run out of steam. They get angry. And I think even if they keep going on and on, you can always gently shame them. That's a term I like, that you don't have to be a doormat to be calm with people. You don't have to let people walk over you. You can gently shame. You could say, I would like to talk about this, and I don't think it sounds like you don't want to have a dialogue with me if you're just kind of yelling at me. Do you want to have a real conversation? Sometimes on especially on the pro-choice shows, I'll have people who they'll give an answer, and I know there's a little dig in the question, almost like an insult to me or the faith. And I'll ask them point blank, do you want to have a serious conversation? Because I do. So here it's about walking that fine line between being assertive without being aggressive. So those are some pointers I would offer. Would you, any other thoughts or like any other?
No, yeah, that was really great, actually. It really helped me. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks very, very much. 888-318-7884 is our number. We're talking about when the world hates you. I mean, in a certain sense, as with the citation you gave us at the beginning of the show, there has to be some rejoicing when the world hates us for our faith. I mean, if with Jesus being clear that if they treated the master that way, why should they treat the servant any better?
Right. It's not something that we shouldn't seek out persecution for its own sake, but we shouldn't be afraid of it. And we also have to avoid the temptation. Now, sometimes online people will say that Christians have a persecution complex or a martyrdom complex. And so here we have to be careful that we don't do things that are actually immoral or wrong or just imprudent. Yeah. And then when people call us out on that, to say that we are being persecuted, for example. Yeah. So, for example, if you were a Christian school teacher in a public school and you want to lead a prayer with your students, and then the school says you can't do that and you get in trouble, you say I'm being persecuted, that's not a wise thing to do, because if the school were in its right accord, they would also tell a Muslim teacher or a Jewish teacher or a Hindu teacher that you can't lead a prayer with your students. So you have to be careful not to cry persecution when you're asking for unequal treatment. But it's fair to say without whininess or wanting, undue attention, to say people should be concerned about this. I'm trying to live out my faith, and the state is not allowing me to do so. It's putting up these obstacles, whether it's here in the U.S. or abroad. On my podcast, I have an episode that's going to go up tomorrow where I talk about how people have transgender ideology imposed on them. I shared a video of a student in Scotland whose teacher takes him outside of the class, ejects him from class for saying there are only two genders, men and women. It's biological. And the teacher says, you can have that opinion, but keep it to yourself. You're in trouble because you're telling that to other people. To me, he said that's not the policy of the national schools. Yeah. The policy is there's more than two genders. And so here, you're not to say, hey, other people, and the student says, you get to express your views, why can't I express mine? Try to look for genuine double standards and call them out when appropriate.
Could I share one with you?
Sure.
Up at the University of California, Berkeley, maybe 5-6 years ago, this young woman is on the welcoming team, for the incoming freshmen. So she's on the, hey, welcome to UC Berkeley team. And she's wearing a cross around her neck.
Right.
Right. It's not a crucifix. She's just wearing a cross. So
right.
And the dean of students says to her, as long as you're representing the university, you can't wear that cross. And she said...
Then I would say, then that's where, instead of crying persecution, you should go for the double standard immediately and say, well, but Dean, I have a question. If I had a Jewish volunteer with me, would you tell him he can't wear his yarmulke?
Yeah,
if I had a Muslim volunteer with me, would you tell her she can't wear a hijab?
But what struck me was that this is the dean of students who doesn't even know the basic laws of religious freedom in the United States. Doesn't even know that what he did is against the law.
So I have been on campuses where students have told me it violates church and state for there to be a Christian club on campus. That the university...
They just don't even understand their own country.
They don't understand that separation of church and state. People nowadays think that it was designed to keep the church from taking over the state. That's not the primary reason. The primary reason, the state does not have to fear the church. The church has always had to fear the state. The state is the one with the guns and the prisons. When you look in the history of the church has always it's been more in danger from the state than the other way around.
We have most of the lace, though.
Most of the what?
Lace.
The lace?
Yeah. Do you know what lace is like when they put on an altar or they put on a set fabric?
Yeah, I'll say the shock troops are coming. They have mace. Don't worry, Trent. We have lace and incense. But that's the point that I would bring up when you're going through to look for the double standards, to be able to identify them. Although ironically, I would say even when it's been quote unquote benevolent. So separation of church and state has actually been a good thing for the church in America. When you look at churches in Europe, for example.
Like Germany,
that are national churches, both countries that have national churches and churches that receive stipends from the government. Mm-hmm. So to be Catholic, you have to register with the government. Some of your tax dollars go. The churches there are dying. They're shrinking because they have required so much from the state. There was a saint, I'd have to look it up here later. I quoted it in my socialism book. Dorothy Day, I know you have a fondness for Dorothy Day. You've done some reading and study.
Yeah,
on
I
her.
love Dorothy Day. Yeah,
She quoted. People always think like she was just some, 1930s hippie or socialist, and she was not. She was very skeptical of state intervention, and she once quoted. She quoted Saint Hilary of Poitiers, I believe, Saint Hilary, who said, "The less we ask of Caesar, the less we must expect from Caesar."
Right.
As the sense of let's not ask too much of Caesar, so we don't have to have Caesar encroach on our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, there's more callers. I'm sorry I've made you wait, but we've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back to take your calls on When the World Hates You with Trent Horn right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
We're glad you're with us. Stick around for more Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
You know, I have a very hard time sometimes, and I'm so frustrated. I mean, frustrated. Somebody says, "How'd you do all this, Mother?" I say, "I didn't." And they look at me, "Huh? The Lord did it. God does everything. Without me," He said, "you do nothing."
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn, our guest this hour. Hey, next hour, Don Eden Goldstein's going to be here. Don's written one of the best kind of spiritual memoirs that's been written in a long time. Sunday Will Never Be the Same. A rock and roll journalist opens her ears to God. And we're going to have a little bit of Monday afternoon fun with Don. We're going to talk a bit about 1960s music, and actually, you'll be surprised. Don will share how Jesus played a role in some of the music that you remember from the 1960s. And we'll then talk about if there's any hope for pop culture actually being something that can open people to Jesus rather than closing them off to him, as The Handmaid's Tale does. Well, I don't know. I've only seen 2 episodes of The Handmaid's Tale, but it didn't
read
seem
enough.
like something that would invite you to be a Christian.
Yes.
Let's go to wait, no, who was up next? It's Nathan in Traverse City, Michigan. Nathan, you have a question for Trent Horn?
Hello. Hi. So my question was, sometimes when I'm at a social event with, I guess, classmates, not necessarily friends.
Sure.
Sometimes when they're talking, they'll just start, dissing and bad-mouthing the Catholic Church, and Catholicism in general, and I'm not really sure, if I should stand up against it, how I should, and how to do that without coming across as just self-righteous.
Yeah, Nathan, what do you think it means to be self-righteous? What are you concerned about?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm using self-righteous right, but...
Yeah, just tell me what you're worried about.
Yeah, I want to be able to come across as just a normal person so that I can possibly, share the faith with people,
right.
not seem like a stingy old Catholic.
Sure. I always love getting ideas for books. That's a great subtitle, actually. I'm going to write Evangelism 101 subtitle: How to Come Off as a Normal Person.
It's actually not a bad goal.
No, it's not. And I think I see where you're coming from, Nathan. That and I've been in these situations too, actually, especially shortly after my conversion, which took place about. Well, this is funny. Now that I'm 34, I've spent half my life being Catholic. So 17 years ago, I became Catholic. And during that time, now my life has changed a lot since then, for the better, obviously. But back then, I had a lot more non-Catholic friends, and I'd spend a lot of time with them. And they knew I was Catholic, but they would say these kinds of things, or they would rip into the church in front of me, and some of them would kind of do it to get a rise out of me. So I think there's two extremes we're trying to navigate here. One is just to be a doormat who just is like, oh, I don't care, haha, yeah, the church is so lame sometimes, and we're not sticking up for our faith. We don't want to do that. But the other is to come across as being overly sensitive or whiny, or that we don't know how to take criticism well, that we come across as almost defensive, which isn't a good way to come across it. If you come off defensive to people when they make fun of the church, that can be seen as an admission, a tacit admission, you don't fully believe this is true. Like, you get worked up when people criticize the faith and you get angry and defensive in response. Some people may interpret that as, oh, this person doesn't know how to give us a good answer. They're just being defensive. They're worried that we're actually right. So I think a better approach is to calmly and assertively call them out on what they're doing. And I've been in these situations before with non-Catholic friends. So if they make a joke at the Catholic faith, you could make a kind of a sarcastic comment that borders on passive-aggressive, like, oh, I'm sure a Catholic would never be offended by that, or to say something like that. So it depends on your temperament and the temperament of the people with you. That's one approach. The other is just to ask a very honest question, like, well, why do you think this about the church? Or what do you think the church should do? Just to actually, and of course, as I say, this depends on people's temperament. Some people are okay with a sarcastic approach to get conversations going. Not everyone can wield sarcasm. It's like the surgeon's knife. You got to wield it wisely. You could just ask a very honest question, like, well, what did you mean by that? I just really want to understand where you're coming from when you say this. And as I said earlier in the show with Cy, to point out when somebody attacks our faith or attacks the church, keep on the lookout for a double standard. You can ask that in the form of a question, like, would you say the same thing about a Muslim, or would you say the same thing about a Jewish person? Do you think that's okay to say about Catholics? I just really want to know. And then it doesn't come off as defensive. You're coming off as somebody who cares about the truth, and you want to hold people accountable for the things they say because you care a lot about your faith. It matters to you. So those might be a few different approaches that I would take. Is that helpful? Do you have any other questions, or?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And I'd also recommend on our website at shop.catholic.com, I have a DVD called 3 Secrets to Sharing the Faith that goes over that Socratic questioning approach. That might also be helpful for you. So I hope that's helpful, and thank you for calling in.
Thank you very, very much. Let us go now to Joseph in New Orleans, listening on EWTN. Joseph, you with us?
Oh, hello, gentlemen. It's very instructional listening to these techniques of conversation you are teaching us. Anyway, my question is, I have experienced anger even from Catholics regarding migrants and nuclear disarmament. So I'm standing with the Pope, who says that no country has the right to hermetically seal itself from migrants. And I'm standing with the Pope again and with the Vatican for total nuclear disarmament for every country. And so, yeah, I would appreciate some, your insight.
Sure. I think that's a helpful insight I'm happy to get into, Joseph. What have people been mad about, in the sense that why in particular were they angry at you because you said these things?
Yeah, with the migrants, you see, because I think they are missing the big picture.
Right.
Because, I'm from Europe, and there is a big problem with the migrants in Europe. But people are missing the big picture, that these people got their homes destroyed, they did not start on this journey just, looking for an adventure. That's
right.
One point. And the other thing with the nuclear arms, people are totally dismissing the fact that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were war crimes, and we cannot trust the government not to commit war crimes, and we will be guilty of war crimes.
Okay, sure. Joseph, let me weigh in on those two things. Because I think what's also important when we share our faith with other people, that people can be angry in response, we have to make sure that we're presenting exactly what the church teaches. That way what they're angry at is church teaching and not a particular presentation of it. So, for example, when you mentioned about immigration, I think you're absolutely right that one view that a country cannot take is that migrants have no right whatsoever to try to find a better life for themselves, and that a state should never consider the interests of immigrants. That's not a position a Catholic could hold. But from there, the span of different policies, the range of policies one could take on immigration reform or immigration policies, it's somewhat broad, and it will depend on different countries, whether you're in Europe, the United States, how many immigrants the country can take in. So I would recommend that when you're in these conversations to point people to the Catechism, first on immigration. That'd be paragraph 2241, that talks about how political authorities, the prosperous nations are obliged, to the extent they are able, to welcome the foreigner in search of security. So say, look, if you're Catholic, this is what the church teaches on immigration. It's not one or the other. People have to, nations should accept people as they are able to, in accord with the common good. When it comes to nuclear weapons, you could always point them to paragraph 2315 that talks about the accumulation of arms. It doesn't talk about nuclear weapons in specifics, but the arms race usually refers to nuclear weapons. Here, the church does not say that as a policy, nations must unilaterally disarm and get rid of nuclear weapons. All it says is that this method of deterrence gives rise to strong moral reservations, and that it's something that we should seriously consider in the dangers that are involved in it. So it involves a prudential judgment. So as I said before, I would recommend paragraphs 2315 and 2241 in the Catechism. When you're in these discussions, that way you're ask them, what do you think of these texts, and you're going off what the church teaches on that in its social doctrine. So I hope that's helpful, and glad you called in.
Thanks, Joseph. Let's go real quick to who's up next. We'll go to Christopher in Duluth, Minnesota. Christopher, your question or point for Trent?
Well, what I have noticed is, well, my perception of hate is that when I've seen a lot of people who have hated or disliked, I've seen more contempt than hate. There are people that hate, but I've seen a lot more contempt lately. That it's not that people, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that more people think that they are more or less above you, that you're beneath them.
Yes, that's an excellent point, Christopher. I think you're right on the money on that.
Sure.
You know, and my issue is, my question is not why do people feel that way, but why do they think that way? Why is it that they have so much contempt, that they think that they're better than you?
Well, I think that's part of that. Yeah, let me get to that before we run out of time here, Christopher. I think that's part of human nature. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride, I love the older translations, pride goeth before the fall, or before destruction. That as human beings, we want to elevate ourselves. That's what Adam and Eve did in the garden. That's what human beings do. Catholics, we have a temptation to want to say, oh, well, I'm Catholic, I have the fullness of faith, I'm better than you. People who think they have the fullness of truth, whether they're Catholic or not, have a temptation to be prideful in that regard. And as Catholics, we should not be proud of that. We should be humble about the message that we have been entrusted with, and then humbly share it to those who take pride in their own errors. And I think that's the best way for us to share the gospel, to remember that if people hate us, we want them to hate us for the truth, not for something obnoxious that we're doing.
Christopher, thank you very, very much. Thanks to everybody who called. Hey, next hour, Don Eden Goldstein's going to be here. I think you're really going to enjoy this for a summer Monday afternoon. Trent Horn, thank you very much. I feel like we could have done a couple hours on this.
We could have. It was fun, so.
Yeah, and I'm going to hate you less now. No, that's not right. I didn't mean it that way. Less contempt.
Any improvement is always good in my book.
Thanks, Trent. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
We live in an age of indifference. Does truth exist? Maybe. Is there a God? Who knows? Does it matter what religion you believe in? Probably not. If you think so, fine. I'm spiritual, but not religious. Apologist Matt Nelson says this indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates our culture. And rather than remain indifferent, he did something about it. In his new book, Just Whatever, Matt looks at the different kinds of indifference you likely encounter in your friends and family members, and maybe in yourself, and offers an antidote to the problem that plagues our age. Order your copy of Just Whatever today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Author Mark McNeil spent years in the Oneness Pentecostal movement, praying in its lively services, zealously spreading its unconventional teachings, and rejecting mainstream Christianity as misguided. Then he left it all behind. All in the Name is the story of a man who believed he was among an elite group of believers who followed the true faith when so many others had strayed. But an inquisitive mind, careful study, and the action of the Holy Spirit finally led Mark out of Oneness Pentecostalism and into the Catholic Church. This is an inspiring conversion story you won't want to miss. It's a faith strengthener for Catholics and an intriguing challenge to those who deny the doctrine of the Trinity. Order your copy of All in the Name today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Is the church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
If only evangelization was easy. But the truth of the matter is that most of the time, it's not. Talking about the Catholic faith is enough of a challenge even before dealing with the roadblocks that keep people from listening with an open mind. Apologist Carlo Broussard recognized that as he wrote Prepare the Way, a guide to step-by-step strategies that readers can use to break down those barriers to the very existence of God and religious truth, barriers to basic Christian beliefs, and barriers to the distinctive teachings and claims of the Catholic Church. Don't let obstacles get in your way. Learn how to overcome them. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
And welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and as I promised, we got a great hour for you, especially for a summer Monday afternoon. Delighted to be with you. Our number 888-318-7884 if at any point you want to get in on the conversation. 888-318-7884. Don Eden Goldstein has a brand new, well, I say brand new, but almost a brand new Sunday Will Never Be the Same. A rock and roll journalist opens her ears to God. This is a spiritual memoir, really, and one that starts or winds its way through a fascinating world of rock and roll reporting, all the way to the gospel and into the Catholic Church. And you can get it at Catholic Answers Press. And I have to be honest with you, it's not the usual book that we publish. We do a lot of apologetics and that kind of thing. And memoir is a little different for us. And that's why I think everybody here is so delighted by it and supportive of it. And we think you'll just love it. So I hope you'll take a look. Today, we talk with Dawn about the music of the 1960s, and her particular love is the West Coast of the United States, the music that came from that direction in the 1960s. Dawn Eden Goldstein, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. To be honest with you, Cy, I really love British music as well, but I had asked to talk about West Coast music today because it goes with my upcoming West by Northwest tour.
I thought you might have seen the that new documentary, Laurel Canyon. Who did it? Jacob Dylan, Bob Dylan's son, made one. I thought that might have inspired you, but you were inspired by your own tour coming up out here.
Yes, exactly. That's right. I wanted to say that God made it to the West Coast a long time before I did with my book tour, and you can hear it in the West Coast music.
Now, Dawn, you don't begin your life as a Catholic. Your background is Jewish, and kind of via your mother in particular, a background of searching, of spiritual seeking.
Yes,
am I saying that correctly?
Right. Yes, that's absolutely right. I was raised Reform Jewish, which is one of the more liberal branches of Judaism. After my parents' divorce when I was 6, my mother started searching. So there were also these New Age influences in my household growing up. And then I myself, as I describe in Sunday Will Never Be the Same, I went through my own period of searching and really questioning once I became a teenager. I had some wounds in my childhood that I talk about, including the wound of sexual abuse. And so as a teen, I really doubted that God existed, or if he did exist, I doubted that he really cared about me.
Yeah.
So I went through a time of questioning, and it was from that really agnostic background that I eventually encountered Christ when I was 31, became a Protestant, and eventually at the age of 37, praise God, I entered into full communion with the Catholic Church.
Well, I wonder then what your take is on, and we'll get to the more Catholic-y stuff, but the fact that at some point, after Frank Sinatra, apparently I think even after Elvis Presley, the pop music became associated with spiritual searching. I don't know if it was the Beatles or if it was the Mamas and the Papas, but how and why do you think that happened?
You know, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I think that a lot of people mischaracterize 60s rock, especially when people think of the 60s, they often think of late 60s, the psychedelic era. I think a lot of people characterize it as simply being under the influence of psychedelic drugs. And so they don't take seriously spiritual aspects. But in fact, even though certainly drugs were an influence, the very reason why many people took to drugs was because they were trying to come to some spirituality that they could own. People weren't satisfied with simply receiving a particular type of religious belief in their household. They wanted to feel like they personally could own to a particular spirituality. And some people eventually came all the way around or all the way back to Christianity, whether it was Protestantism or Catholicism, as you've had it on Catholic Answers Live before from Dion DiMucci, who after many explorations came back to the faith of his childhood.
888-318-7884, our number. Don Eden Goldstein, our guest this hour, and Don spent years, pretty much the 90s, at least, as a rock journalist. Am I right? In the 90s?
Yes, that's correct. From the late 80s through the 90s, and I still do a little rock journalism now and again.
Yeah, that's right. And I also noticed on Twitter, you'll comment on if it's an important milestone. I don't know, a birthday of somebody who's a great artist, or a milestone where this song was recorded, 40 or 50 years ago today, that kind of thing.
That's right. And I even still write songs. There's a rock band called the Anderson Council that are on the GEM, JEM label. They have a new album coming out called Worlds Collide, and I wrote the lyrics to one of the songs on their album called Camden Town. Another song I wrote for them called Girl on the Northern Line was played on Sirius Radio on a couple of their different channels. So that's another way in which I keep one toe in the music business.
Don Eden Goldstein, again, our guest, 888-318-7884, our number. So you don't fall into the camp that says everything in pop culture is poison.
No, and I don't think that particular camp can be really called a Catholic camp. The Catholic Church has always really claimed whatever is good and true and beautiful as having its origin in God. And so there are some true, good, and beautiful things in popular culture. We certainly can't take pop culture whole and unfiltered. We have to do like Saint Benedict says in his rule and dash every thought against the rock that is Christ. That image is from like the days when people used to do their laundry by a stream, and they would actually hit their clothes against rocks to get the dirt out of their clothes. We're supposed to do that with every thought and every artifact of pop culture to hit it against the Christian revelation, so that whatever remains is something that we can take to ourselves.
So in the 1960s then, in this era of spiritual exploration, it did seem that people, the baby boomers now are kind of getting their comeuppance in a way. Everyone's writing articles about how the baby boomers ruined the world and books about all the damage the baby boomers did. And maybe some of it is true. They were the first generation to have been raised on television, and there does seem to have been something sometimes self-centered, I guess, in their manner of living, or at least in the way that it was reported that baby boomers were living. But one thing that they definitely wanted was something more authentic. Authenticity was very important to these searchers of the 60s.
Yes, that's right. Just like that song of the time, actually sung by John Lennon, who had his own kind of back and forth relationship with God. Even at the same time when John Lennon was singing "Imagine There's No Heaven," he was also singing "Just Give Me Some Truth."
Yeah.
He didn't yet know, or wasn't yet willing to accept where the truth came from above, but he knew that there was something that he was longing for. Right. that was true. And I think we can say that of a lot of people from that era, even if they didn't know where to look for the truth. There's that in that song from Tommy, Pete Townshend's rock opera that The Who performed, where they're singing, "For what he knows is the truth." Yeah. And there's this sense that the truth is something that's beyond us in the sense that it exists, but we didn't make it. It's
Right.
something that we have to find. We don't own it. We discover it, and we let it take ownership of us.
To some degree, though, that search for authentic religious experience kind of came to be an exercise in looking everywhere but in Christianity, didn't it? I mean, like, I'll go to India, I'll talk to the Maharishi, but but please don't try to sell me Christianity.
Yes, unfortunately, that was the attitude. The attitude of the 60s was rebellion against authority, and in as much as Christianity was thought to be the authoritative religion that had shaped Western culture, that was mocked and rejected. At the same time, some people, even towards the end of the 1960s, were discovering that perhaps the most rebellious thing to do was to actually rebel against the counterculture and write and sing about God. So you had the Jesus freak movement of the late 60s, when the Byrds, I think even before Roger McGuinn really identified strongly as a Christian. The Byrds were making their Sweetheart of the Rodeo album, which had a number of explicitly Christian songs.
Right. Yeah. It's so fascinating that many of these at least here in Southern California, I don't think this happened in Northern California as much, but the Southern California hippies, many of them ended up being Jesus freaks and then founding new churches like the Calvary Chapel churches and that kind of thing. So you're right. Those who didn't stop, who kept seeking, often came to find Jesus.
Yes, and they were given the grace of coming to find him in a way that they were able to take responsibility for their own faith. G.K. Chesterton talks often in his writings about a kind of dream that he had as a child, not like a sleeping dream, but a kind of fantasy he had of this story in which a person travels the whole world and then finally comes to this thing that's the strangest thing that this person has seen in all the world. And as he's looking at this bizarre looking thing that seems completely foreign to him, he realizes that it's his own house, that after walking around the entire earth, he's finally come to his home and is able to see it as something new. And for Chesterton, that was his relationship with Christianity, and that was what led him to recognize that his true home was in the Catholic Church.
To come back to where we started and to see it for the first time.
Yes,
the little paraphrase of T.S. Eliot.
Yes, T.S. Eliot.
Dawn Eden Goldstein is our guest. Sunday Will Never Be the Same is her latest book. She's going to be on tour, and I'm going to give you the dates later in the show about where she'll be here on the West Coast doing a book tour. Our number, 888-318-7884, and I'm going to let you talk with Dawn, but we got to take a break first. Before we go to the break, I'm going to throw something out at you, Dawn, because this is one. I'll let you ponder it while we're on the break. But the word love became really, really important to that generation that we're talking about now. But in some ways, it had to be reduced from the Christian concept of love to something a little bit baser in order to be useful. I just want to get your thoughts on the use of the word love in American pop music, or British, but in pop music in general, when we come back. Dawn's book, as I said, is Sunday Will Never Be the Same, and you can save $5 right now until midnight tonight. Just go to shop.catholic.com, click on the Sunday Will Never Be the Same banner, and you get the book for $5 off. Shop.catholic.com right now.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live is proudly supported by CatholicChemistry.com, a new dating site for Catholics who want to do dating right and believe relationships start with Catholic Chemistry. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicChemistry.com for their generous support on the web at CatholicChemistry.com.
Is prayer powerful? St. Alphonsus Liguori put it this way: he who prays will be saved. He who does not pray, well, you get the point. Prayer can bring us salvation. It's the means of putting us into communion with God, and God can do all things. The more our will lines up with the will of God, the more powerful our prayers, and the simpler they become ultimately. Be it done to me, Lord, according to thy word. That's the prayer God will always answer.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Delighted to have you with us on this Monday afternoon, and our very good friend Dawn Eden Goldstein here with us. She's the author of Sunday Will Never Be the Same, a rock and roll journalist opens her ears to God. Okay, so I left you. Oh, you're holding it up. Okay, I'll hold it up too for the the video audience. So have you been trained by a PR professional when they mention the book? Hold the book up. Or,
It's simply a conditioned response. Did somebody mention books?
Yeah,
My book?
right. $5 off right now at shop.catholic.com. Okay, so help me out with love. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at some lyrics from songs from the 1960s. And sometimes I get the feeling with these pop songs, if you think of the word love as having its full Christian meaning, this is a magnificent song. But I don't think they're giving it its full Christian meaning. Am I wrong to think of it that way?
Oh, do you have a particular song in mind?
No, come on. Well, All You Need Is Love. I'll just go with that because it's the most obvious.
You know, I recently looked at those lyrics, and the lyrics are certainly very vague and general, and given some of the comments that Lennon had recently made about Christianity, you know, perhaps he didn't have the Gospels on the brain when he and Paul were working on that song. But, you know, it could certainly, one could read Christianity into that. But there are other songs, you know, that certainly throughout the word love with, as you said, baser meanings, some reducing it simply to sexual love, which is an aspect of love, but is not the whole story.
I can even remember as a child in catechism class, a priest making that point that the word love is a more, you know, I don't remember how he said it to us as children, but it's got much more depth to it than it's being given by all these. And he was a little dismissive, you know, but all, you know, these modern songwriters, that there's actually something that you need to get about the word love that's much deeper than that. That always kind of stuck with me. Again, 888-3. Oh, sorry, Dawn.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, you know, it's an important point to say that as Catholics, we don't dismiss boy-girl love. We don't say that sexual love is on its face unworthy of the name love. I was trained by Thomists when I went to school for theology, and people who follow St. Thomas Aquinas are quite adamant that any earthly pleasure that, you know, doesn't, you know, come from something that's intrinsically evil, any earthly pleasure is in some way a foretaste of heaven. So we can say, you know, inasmuch as boy-girl sexual love gives us pleasure, there's something in it that is connected to the larger understanding of love. It's just not the full story.
Brian in St. Louis is first up. You ready to go to calls, Dawn?
Sure. Hi, Brian.
Okay. Well, hang on. I have to click the little button. Hi, Brian in St. Louis. Your question for Dawn.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, one of the most remarkable entertainment industry conversion stories I heard was of Bob Dylan's. I was wondering how that affected her at the time, or whether it did or not, and what her impression of that was. It was in the late 70s, I think.
Sure. Well, at that time, I was I was about 10 or 11 years old, and was still Jewish. And I do remember hearing Dylan sing "Gotta Serve Somebody" on Saturday Night Live, and just thinking it was the most boring song. In as much as I knew any Dylan, I just thought this is not his best. More recently, I've actually written an article on Bob Dylan for Angelus magazine on the box set of his Christian music, where I'm able to appreciate it now on a level that I wasn't then. And quite honestly, he wrote a lot of better songs during that time than "Got to Serve Somebody." There's a song on that box set called "I Ain't Gonna Go to Hell for Anyone," which is just amazing. Even Penn Jillette, who's an atheist, is in the liner notes of the box set. He raves about that song. So no, Dylan didn't influence me, but I think it's important to point out, and Brian, I'm glad that you mentioned Dylan, that long before Dylan became Christian, Dylan, in his songs, was writing with many scriptural themes, even themes from the Gospels. Of course, if you want to learn more about those, you can watch any one of many Bishop Robert Barron videos on Dylan, where he goes into this, because he's a huge Dylan fan. But this brings us to, why would Dylan, even as someone who grew up Jewish, be familiar with the Gospels? Because that was part of the way that people were formed. My dad remembers at the start of every school day praying Psalm 23 and praying the Lord's Prayer. And for him, as a Jewish child, he didn't object to those. There was nothing inherent in them that he would disagree with. It was a part of culture that was in the air that people breathed at that time. And I think it helped popular culture become a lot richer, because people understood biblical references, whether or not they were Christian, in a way that we've lost in pop culture today.
Brian, what do you make of that?
That was very interesting. I did buy that box set she's talking about, and it's wonderful. I think that's some of the best music he's written, frankly.
Yes.
And I just wish you continued success in your writing. I think you're a very heroic and courageous person.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. We think that about Dawn as well. Dawn, when you mentioned Dylan, even before he's a Christian, there are these themes there.
Yes.
Did he write the Byrds song "Turn, Turn, Turn," or did he not write that one? I can't remember.
No, Dylan wrote "Mr. Tambourine Man."
Oh, Mr. Tambourine Man. Okay.
Turn, 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 Turn was Pete Seeger from the Weavers, who wrote many other classic songs as well. But certainly, that's a great example of a song with scriptural references. It's taken almost entirely from chapter 3 of the book of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, I would imagine to a kid listening in the 60s, there would be some familiarity with the book of Ecclesiastes that probably not for a kid today. They may not even know that this is, basically the song, it's got a few things that are not, but basically the song is a long quotation from the Bible.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Set to music. And, people appreciated the Bible as a source of wisdom in those days in a way that they don't today. I think today, if I say Bible in the wider culture, people think, oh, she's a fundamentalist, and they just assume that just mentioning the Bible means that I'm going to proof text, that sort of thing.
Right.
Whereas back then, I think people would have been offended if anyone were to, how can I put it? If anyone were to simply limit the Bible to a certain verse, because they appreciated that the Bible in a certain way belonged to everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's striking, is how much the Bible even itself has been politicized both by those who won't use it, who refuse, and by those of us who do use it, that we've over-politicized it. And it's just obvious that Pete Seeger, you can't get more leftist than Pete Seeger. And he's writing a Bible song. It's hard to imagine a true leftist today using the Bible as the root of their music.
That's right. It is hard to imagine. And if and when they do, and I think very occasionally they do so in a way that kind of harkens back to the 60s, because they have a certain nostalgia for when people would do that. But what's really needed is to reclaim the Bible as a source for culture today.
Right, as a source of a foundational wisdom that the whole culture can draw on.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because, anyways, we're going to take a quick break. You can hear the music. Don Eden Goldstein, our guest. Sunday Will Never Be the Same is the book. We're talking pop music and Jesus and the church, and probably going to talk about the Beach Boys when we come back.
This is Bishop James Conley of the Diocese of Lincoln. Keep it right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Turns out that today, as back then, this question has a lot of different answers. So many groups want to appropriate Jesus, tweaking his identity until he looks and sounds just like one of them. But then you no longer have the Lord, says apologist Trent Horn. You have an imposter. In his new groundbreaking book, Counterfeit Christ, Trent exposes 18 phony versions of Jesus that we encounter today, helping you to recognize the fakes when you see them, explain why they're phony, and make a case for the full truth and beauty of who Jesus is, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Order your copy of Counterfeit Christ today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Love and beauty. As a little girl, Dawn Eden Goldstein knew she wanted those things, that in them, somehow, she would find God. Over the years, as a rock journalist, she moved among some of popular music's best-known artists, straining to capture that transcendent love and beauty in every note and lyric. In Sunday Will Never Be the Same, Dawn recounts her spiritual journey in beautifully wrought detail, mixing powerful accounts of trauma, healing, and epiphany with funny anecdotes from inside the music scene. It is the rare conversion story that delights as it inspires, amuses as it edifies, and ultimately lays before the reader a lived testimony to the transforming grace of Christ. Order your copy of Sunday Will Never Be the Same by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This is Deacon Harold Burke Sivers. The Morning Glory team asked the question, changing the rules? Priestly ordination in the Amazon. Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Don Eden Goldstein, our guest. We're talking about music, which fits because Don's latest book is Sunday Will Never Be the Same. A rock and roll journalist opens her ears to God, and there's all kinds of, in the book, references to people that you met, some people you didn't get to meet that would have been very nice if you could have met, but your life kind of in this world of rock and roll. And today we talk a little bit about what happened in the 60s, but I got to tell the folks some things about Dawn before we go any further, because we got that. She's going on a book tour for this book. And it starts July 13th in Richland, Washington, July 14th in Sammamish, Washington, July 15th in Columbia Falls, Montana. Then she's in Tacoma, Washington on the 17th. Capitola, California, which is, I didn't even know that was a town, on July 19th, Santa Clara on July 20th. Then she gets down in our neighborhood, Los Angeles, July 21st, San Diego, July 22nd. So if you're near any of those places and you'd like to meet Dawn, and you're going to do some reading from the book, or what are you going to do at those?
Oh, yes. Well, at most of those events, I'll be giving a talk and doing a little reading. I've actually been told by audiences that they prefer when I do less reading and just tell my story. So mostly it'll be that.
Are you just a bad reader? What's the problem there, Dawn? I mean, maybe spice it up a little bit.
What it has to do with is the fact that my book requires a lot of context, and if I just take a page from it and start reading, people don't know the references. So maybe what I'll try is giving context and then reading a short bit, and maybe it'll come out better that way.
I imagine this is on the website somewhere here at Catholic Answers, but I don't have an address to go to. So just go to Catholic.com and put in Dawn's name, Dawn Eden Goldstein, and you'll find this.
Also, they can go to my Twitter, which is @DawnOfMercy, or my own blog, which is Dawn Eden, DawnEden.blogspot.com, and click on appearances.
Yeah. Also, after the whole tour is over, you're going to be at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan giving a talk for the Edith Stein lecture. I just think that's a wonderful honor, a beautiful. I mean, Edith Stein is one of the great people certainly of her era, and as if people don't know, Edith Stein, a Jewish woman, became Catholic, became a Carmelite, murdered by the Nazis in a concentration camp, and just one of the great minds and one of the great hearts. How do you see those two? Maybe as John Paul the Great figure combines a heart and a mind like that, I don't know. But really one of the extraordinary people, and you get to give the lecture.
I'm really honored to be giving this lecture. I think that perhaps one of the reasons the Edith Stein Guild chose me to deliver their annual lecture at St. Patrick's Cathedral is that I have some similarities in my own life to Edith Stein, in that I grew up in a Jewish family, and I spent time when I was questioning God's existence. Edith Stein even was an atheist for a time. I obtained a doctorate in the humanities. Edith Stein's doctorate was in philosophy, mine's in theology. And I also live a celibate life in the world, which is what Edith Stein did after her conversion for several years, until she was no longer able to teach because of the Nazis' laws against Jews. And that was when she entered the Carmelite convent, which was something that she had long wanted to do. So there are certain similarities, and the topic of my talk at St. Patrick's Cathedral on August 3rd is what Edith Stein taught me about the mystery of spiritual motherhood. So really looking forward to that.
Oh, praise God. I'm so happy. I think that's just wonderful.
Thank you.
I don't know. It's kind of a small room for you, St. Patrick's Cathedral, but I hope it works out. But let's talk a little bit about some 60s songs, because I do want to talk about the Beach Boys, which is also known as Brian Wilson. Some lovely, really lovely, innocent songs from them.
Yes.
That they just almost don't seem to be of their era in a way. They're really beautiful sentiments. I guess that they don't seem to be of their era because they don't in any way mock innocence. They don't mock sexual innocence. They seem to almost take the traditional view of chastity and marriage and intimacy as a given, not as a thing to be critiqued, but as a given.
Yes.
I'm thinking of God Only Knows, but I'm also thinking of that other one where we could live together, we could be so happy.
Yes, wouldn't it be nice?
Wouldn't it be
yes.
nice? Yeah.
Both those songs are from the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds album, which is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, pop album of all time.
Right. Yeah. If you're tired of thinking of the Beatles, what's the one that everyone always says is a masterpiece? Sgt. Pepper is the greatest album of all time. Try listening to Pet Sounds sometime.
Which came out before Sgt. Pepper's and was considered the major inspiration of it.
Yeah, Paul McCartney has said that he felt they had to do something great after Pet Sounds came out, but
yes.
it's just so. And I imagine this might be part of why McCartney liked it too, because he often seems to be the more traditional of the two songwriters of the Lennon-McCartney pair. But what do you make of that? A song like God Only Knows. I mean, where he's just openly speaking of God.
Yes, yes. Well, the concept for that song came from Brian Wilson. His lyricist at that time, Tony Asher, wrote most of the words, but Brian really liked the idea of doing a song called God Only Knows. But at the same time, Brian was nervous about having God in the title of a song. He was afraid it might be controversial. You know, this brings me to another related point, which is that I think many people have this idea that it's only in the 70s, 80s, 90s that the name of God became taboo in popular culture.
Right.
But in fact, as early as 1965, which was when the Second Vatican Council was still going on, people were nervous speaking about God. The following year, no, I think it was either that December 65 when Charlie Brown Christmas was? I think it was December 65. If not, then it was 66. But Charles M. Schulz with the TV program A Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah, the gospel. He put the gospel on TV.
And he had to fight CBS's executives because CBS were like adamant that they could not have Linus read the gospel on this children's program. So that was during a time that, you know, some of us, you know, might look back and say, oh, pop culture was so much more God-friendly during that time.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't. Even then, the culture had changed. And so Brian Wilson did take a chance with God Only Knows. And very thankful he took that chance because it's one of the most beautiful pop songs that anyone could ask for.
I'm curious of your view of why pop culture and pop music as part of pop culture is so skittish about God and about Jesus when, you know, it has been a predominantly Christian culture from its founding. Okay, so is it because say you're at CBS, you're like, yeah, but even if it's 70% of people are Christian, we got to go for the lowest common denominator. We cannot be sticking our head up above what is the lowest common denominator.
I think it is a fear of offending people. And one thing that bothers me as someone of Jewish heritage and, you know, in terms of, you know, my identity, even as a Catholic, I'll always be Jewish, as Cardinal Lustiger, the Jewish cardinal, said. One thing that bothers me is when people who are not Jewish, not Muslim, people who have some Christian background will use the possibility that Jews or Muslims might be offended for keeping Christianity out of the public square. Like, you know, they might say, well, we can't show a Charlie Brown Christmas because some Jewish viewer or Muslim or Hindu viewer might be offended. In fact, even though, yes, occasionally people from other religions are offended, and I would say, you know, they're more likely to be offended if, say, a prayer is being led in a public place that's in the name of Jesus. You know, that's something where a person who's not Christian really can feel excluded. But if it's simply an artifact of popular culture, like not something that people are being made to sing like in a chorus, but something that's simply on the radio, people of other religions than Christianity aren't necessarily offended because often they feel more comfortable living in a country where there is the freedom to speak about one's religion.
That's fascinating.
They would feel uncomfortable in a country where all displays of religion were banned.
Yeah, you know, while you're speaking, I was thinking of Mike Nichols, the movie director. He's Jewish from Germany, and his family came over when Hitler was in power. And he said when the ship came into New York Harbor, and he could see buildings that had the Star of David on them, and it would be like a deli or something like that from the ship. And he said he felt physically afraid for the Jews, like, you are in danger doing that. And his father had to explain to him, no, that's not how it is here. You can have a Jewish deli. It's going to be okay. It is something to be very appreciative of in this country. The kind of
yes.
I don't know, the mild Protestantism that maybe we all make fun of a little bit, it has its benefits as far as a cultural phenomenon.
It really does. There was an important point raised in the previous hour when Trenton Horn was on the show in terms of that people don't understand what the First Amendment and separation of church and state are about.
Yeah.
It's not primarily about freedom from religion. It's not primarily about protecting the state from the church being in control. It's primarily about preventing the state from interfering in matters of religion. That was what our founding fathers had in mind.
But that all being the case, by the 1960s and certainly in the let me just go to the 1970s for a minute. You could watch television all week on all three networks. There was just the three networks and PBS, and you could watch all week. You could have never turned your television off, and never once would you have suspected that anyone in America goes to church. It just didn't appear on the television then. And I feel like sometimes nowadays people say, oh, it's been so horrible, this breakup of and now we have all these different TV stations. Yeah, but a lot of those TV stations, people go to church in them. Like, people talk about God.
Yes.
Like, at least that is a benefit of, it broke that monopoly, but it was a very frightened monopoly that those networks had.
Absolutely. I mean, just the fact that you could have the Jim Gaffigan show on a major cable network, and that they could talk about their life going to church. That was something that one would never have seen on 70s TV.
Right. I think that the people over at Pop TV will be delighted to hear you call that a major network. They're going to be so happy that you did that. We have to take a quick break. We'll continue with our conversation with Don Eden Goldstein. Don's the author of the brand new book, also on sale right now at shop.catholic.com. Sunday Will Never Be the Same. A rock and roll journalist opens her ears to God. If you go over to shop.catholic.com, you get $5 off the book until midnight tonight.
Bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
I'm really a revert. There are a lot of converts on Catholic radio, a lot of reverts, those who have come back to the faith. And ever since I came back to a practice of my faith, I started praying the rosary, going to even daily Mass, God has led me on an amazing journey and used me in a lot of incredible ways that I never dreamed would have been possible.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, tonight, midnight Eastern on EWTN Radio.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
All right, I apologize. He wasn't on the Pop TV network. It was
Jim Gaffigan.
TV Land. The Jim Gaffigan show. It was on TV Land. They'll be similarly delighted to hear themselves referred to as a major cable network. I don't know why.
You're not going to let me live that one down, are you?
No, I am a very cynical and evil person. That's all. Other than that,
but we love you.
I appreciate it. I need it. Again, 888-318-7884 is the number. Now we're going to go through some 60s songs. We'll get hardcore about this thing and actually look at some songs from the 60s and their Christian meanings. But I also want to, as we continue this conversation, and you're welcome to get involved if you want to call 888-318-7884. Talk about, is there a realistic way? Is there any bridge from pop culture to the person of Christ? Because even if we see Christian themes or Bible themes, the key thing is that people come to know the person of Christ, and I wonder how we maybe, develop from some of these pop culture phenomena that at least make reference to Christ or the Bible, some ways of connecting people to the actual person that all of this is about. Does that seem fair enough?
Yes. I think one way to answer that is to say that anywhere that you see something that's honest about the human condition,
right.
Christ is there. Christ who is like us in all things but sin. So certainly, in that sense, we can find him in the pop culture. There's a saying of the ancient Roman playwright Terence, which was a favorite saying of Pope Paul VI, which is, "I am a man. Nothing that is human is alien to me." And Paul VI also writes in his first encyclical of his pontificate, Ecclesiam Suam, that we as Catholics need to be in dialogue with each other and with the world, and that the first circle of our dialogue is the largest circle of our dialogue. It encompasses the whole human race, because anything that any human being experiences, we've experienced as Catholics in some way. So, I think likewise, art that's honest, can be found to have something in it that speaks to Christianity, or where Christ can show through, provided that it's not something that's exploitative.
888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. So in who else's, we mentioned the Beach Boys music, in who else's music, especially from that era, and we're focusing on the West Coast because you're doing your West Coast book tour coming up here, who else was able to incorporate these themes, genuinely religious and sometimes Bible-based or Christ-related themes?
Well, one is Salvatore Bono, Sonny Bono, who certainly grew up Italian Catholic, although he did some wandering later in life. But he was formed in a Catholic mind, and he wrote a beautiful song that's become something of a cult favorite now, called "Laugh at Me." He released it as a solo single. It was a minor hit, I think, in 1965, late 65 or early 66. And the song tells the true story about how Sonny and Cher went into this restaurant where they knew the owners, and it was like it had been a hangout of theirs for a while. But one night, when they went decked out in their rock and roll finest, and back then they were wearing things like crazy fur vests and stuff, and Sonny by then had a long, almost page boy kind of hairdo. But this was 1965, and this was a rather tony Los Angeles restaurant, and so the owner apologetically asked Sonny and Cher to leave because their dress was scandalizing the people present. So Sonny wrote this beautiful song in which he sings, "Laugh at me and I'll cry for you." He's not singing it vindictively.
Yes.
He's saying that he will pray for the people who laugh at him. That's straight from the gospel. That's from the Sermon on the Mount about turning the other cheek and praying for the people who spitefully use you. And Sonny expresses that very thoughtfully, poetically in "Laugh at Me." I invite listeners to look up that song.
Oh, how cool. We got a couple calls for you, and I'm concerned about the time. Shall we go to the calls and then we'll...
Sure.
All right, let's start with, is this really who I think it is? Tom Nash? Our friend Tom?
Hello there.
Hello, Tom Nash.
Hi, Tom.
How are you, Cy? Good to talk to you, Don. Hey, you guys were talking about Wouldn't It Be Nice with Beach Boys, which I enjoyed as a young man growing up, born in '62 in Detroit. But it was interesting that later on they talk about staying the whole night through. That for its time, that kind of raised eyebrows because it's like, what does it mean staying the whole night through? That even that at that time implied that, well, staying the whole night through, they're not married yet. It just showed you where the culture was at, and in a good sense, that would have raised concern. Of course, not to presume that the Beach Boys meant it in a bad way, but I think the culture is in a better place that it would.
Well, actually, they're singing
that.
about marriage. They're singing about longing for marriage and fantasizing about the day when they can, after having spent the day together, hold each other close the whole night through. So it's actually a thoroughly Christian sentiment.
I know. Oh, I could see that too. And I remember that DJs, because it came out and it wasn't exactly clear that was raised an issue. But
it was a nervous time.
Yeah. Versus like with Let's Spend the Night Together with the Stones, they had to
that's
change
the one.
it.
That's the one that
time
caused
together.
concern.
That was very
Yes.
clear.
Yes.
Yes.
And that was problematic, and stuff had to be changed.
Yes, exactly, Tom. That particular song is the one that's caused concern. When the Rolling Stones were performing Let's Spend the Night Together on the Ed Sullivan Show, they were told backstage that they would have to change the lyric to Let's Spend Some Time Together. That video is available, and if I remember correctly, even though the song was announced as Let's Spend Some Time Together by Ed Sullivan, I think Mick Jagger claims that he still sang Night, because Jagger, of course, was a rebel.
That's but you can see how the Rolling Stones song is very different in character from what, I mean, just that the melody, the polyphony when they sing "We Could Be Married." I mean, this beautiful on the Beach Boys record, they are celebrating the idea that we could be married. That's what it's about. What do you think? What do you make of that, theologian Tom Nash?
I would say yes, and it's an affirmation of marriage, and similar to my native Motown, where many of the songs, and Gary Gordy was mindful of it, particularly in the early years, of not wanting to offend a largely white audience, to make sure about what they sang and et cetera, how they presented themselves, given that they were in a more challenging situation as African-American performers, performing oftentimes to white audiences. And I just think that really made the music all the better because they were being mindful. And there's some lyricists with Holland, Dozier Holland.
Don?
Well, that's certainly true. I'd be a little cautious. I don't think, Tom, that you necessarily, meant that Black audiences would be more accepting of non-Christian themes, because we know from just social experience, sociology, that African Americans are one of the more religious, more Christian believing groups in America. So certainly, it wasn't that.
It wasn't a put on.
Yes,
that was real.
Put on,
right?
But it is certainly true that in the early days of Motown, that Berry Gordy was conscious that record stores wouldn't want to necessarily display albums that had pictures of African Americans on the cover. So there, I think the first album by the Marvelettes and other early Motown albums had these sort of silhouetted caricatures of the artists on the cover rather than showing their actual photographs.
Tom Nash.
It's terrible that was the case, that there was such prejudice, but that was how it was.
EWTN and Ave Maria Radio theologian Tom Nash. Also, there's a room in my house named after Tom, the Tom Nash room. I don't know. That's actually true. My wife says, put it in Tom Nash's room, because that's where he stayed when he stayed with us. Thanks for the call. As a matter of fact, just this week, the New York Times had an article about how annoying it is that African-American people are economically liberal, but they won't give up being socially conservative and Christian. They just don't live up to the values of the New York Times. Don Eden Goldstein, there are so many more we could have gotten to. I feel like I maybe monopolized more of the time than I should have, but it's such a delight to have you here with us.
It's really a delight being on your show, too. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
And I want people to come out to the book tour, so give the website again where they can find the dates for the book tour.
dawneden.blogspot.com. That's DAWNEDEN.blogspot.com.
You find it there, and then also if you're going to the Edith Stein lecture, or if you're in the neighborhood in early August, hit that. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. God bless you.
You too. And tomorrow, 2 hours of open forum. And we'll see you then, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.